Welcome, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More podcast. I know what you're thinking. Why is the newer guy talking on the episode? Why is he leading the show? Well, this is one of the shows that I was not a part of. Uh, they went through their cap and no cap episode, and I was not a part of. I did not make the preseason picks. So I am here to be the host and ask them the questions about their preseason picks. It's March. It's finally here. We have entered the March Madness part of the year. It's one of the best parts of the year for college basketball fans and sports fans. You know, um, every sports this part. It's the month of upsets. To be honest, March Madness is more in April, but we are finally here, and it's beginning to be spring. But without further ado, why don't we start? I have a question for both of you to start. Did any of you pick Louisville?
Absolutely not.
I personally avoided that subject. Do not rub it in.
I had to support them today for their game against nobody. Um,
That was so
but
depressing.
it's we're not even good enough to make the NIT. But before we s- before we start, um, if you all want to go, if the fans want to go watch in the Cap and No Cap episode just to get a little bit what we're talking about, you sh- I think you should, and then come back to this one because this one will be certainly a good one. But what picks that you all made really look the dumbest right now? I'll start with you, Les.
Well, I want to start by saying, Ryan, you did a great job on the intro and you got the bean approval. So I think you're doing something all right already. And I kind
Good.
of like this. I kind of like this part of the show. I get to actually be the interviewee instead of the interviewer, and it's kind of nice. Me and Matt just
Yep,
get to talk. We don't have to worry about leading the show. It's great.
I am
But
blessed
anyways,
today.
that's right. Oh Lord. Little forgot my train of thought. But anyways, picks that I thought looked really stupid from my original cap or no cap episode. I said that specifically that Zach Edey would not go back to back and win player of the year. And I typically don't like to pick repeat winners because usually once you win the award once, it's kind of the expectation to do it again. So, but in all honesty, Zach Edey's been even better than last year. Um, a lot of people last year said that he would never make an NBA roster, and the Edey I'm watching right now, I think can make a roster and be a very nice role player for the next 10 years. And he's pretty much because of and a big part because of the inconsistencies of Dalton Connect. Zach Edey's probably going to win the Player of the Year and damn near a landslide again this year. And my second pick that I thought looked really really stupid is that I said St. Mary's guard Aiden Mahaney could have a Jimmer Fredette type season. He's had nowhere close to Jimmer Fredette, and that pick just looks dumber and dumber by the day. But that wraps up my dumb picks from the Cap or No Cap episode.
Yep, and Les, it's all good. You did take one of my questions away, but I have more in the brain. I promise you. Zach Edey really, really proved all wrong and going back to back, kind of like Sheboy did back to back. But Edey's just unstoppable. Sometimes he gets the refs on his side, which if you
I don't think Sheboy went back to back
did he
in Player of the
not?
Year. Did he?
Oh,
I
I
don't
thought.
think Sheboy went. No, I
I
think
gotta look.
Zach Edey. No, I think Zach Edey won it. Zach Edey's first Player of the Year was Sheboy's last year at Kentucky.
Oh, okay. Well,
That is correct.
okay. My bad on that.
It happens.
I think Sheboy had a still really good year. Maybe Zach Edey just took it from him because he was about more inches, 6 inch. But yeah, he's having a wonderful year. Will be the number two on that list. But Matt, what picks of yours really look the dumbest?
It's funny you mentioned Louisville at the start of the show. That there's one team's downfall who needs to be like studied epically because I actually lost to Louisville, and that's Miami. You come off the Final Four. You've got Nigel Pack. You go out. You get Matthew Cleveland. Jim Larinaga is hot as hell right then. And then they just laid an absolute egg this season. Norchad Omier, I thought he was going to take an even bigger step. They just laid a giant egg all the way en route to being the second to last seed in the ACC tournament. Like I said, losing to Louisville and just having an absolutely abysmal year. I guess that's one of those things we're going to use now as a case warning for teams who have one good year based on the performance of a few guys from the portal and a breakout player. Is that you could be the next Miami, but it's hard to say that after North Carolina didn't make the tournament last year anyway. So that's one of the big ones. Is what the hell happened to Miami? That downfall needs to be scientifically studied because I have no idea how it didn't work out other than just lack of depth and lack of chemistry. And the other thing was the entire Pac 12. I mean, Arizona's good. We knew that. We were high on Colorado and USC. I was high on UCLA. Two of those teams got injury ravaged. One of those teams just has a coach who's going to be a coach somewhere else, and I think knew it at the start of the year in UCLA. And Arizona, of course, just they're Arizona. And of course, it's the one team we didn't talk about, Washington State, who honestly looks like they could make a deep run with the height and length in their starting lineup where everybody's above, I think, 6'6". It's just incredible. So the Pac 12 in totality was just a huge miss because of injury bug for USC and Colorado. And whatever the hell happened to UCLA this year, like I said, I think Mick Cronin's got his eyes on the next payout, and he made that very clear from the beginning. So Miami, question mark. I have no idea what went wrong there. And the entirety of the Pac 12 just kind of falling apart in front of us. It always makes you humble.
Yeah, we'll beat Miami at Miami. I didn't know that they could win a road game, but I expected Miami to be a little bit better. Losing Isaiah Wong did suck for them, but I still thought Norchad Omier and Nigel Pack were still gonna hold the place down. But for our next question, we're gonna go the opposite side. Since I started with Les, I'll start with Matt. Going back to back, Matt. What picks look the best of yours?
I mean, I was high on Clemson from the beginning of the year, and they've kind of been up and down, but they're solidly in the field, and I think they did surprise a lot of people. And I was high on them from the beginning because of like the shooting they added and having PJ Hold start with. So Clemson was one that made me look pretty good. The Mountain West takes we have about New Mexico, Boise State, all the Mountain West really balled out for me. Everything I said about the Pac-12 failing me was made up by the Mountain West absolutely being amazing this year. New Mexico on the bubble, but they're playing in the championship game tonight, so I can't imagine that'll be held against them too much. Boise State looks great, and San Diego State looks great. The only one of those teams I didn't see coming was Utah State being that good, and I think they are that good. But the Mountain West in general made us look very smart, and I was very high on Clemson. I'm glad it was that. And I will point out, this isn't the episode we're talking about. But when Les and I did our fantasy player draft out of, I think that was the next episode, every player I picked, I think, made it either to the NCAA tournament or at least their conference championship game. So I know how to pick mid-major players at least, so that's exciting. I can't remember if we talked about Drake a little bit. Drake always makes me look good. They're surprisingly good. And so yeah, thanks to the Mountain West for being a six bid league, and not making me look dumb. I really appreciate that. And shout out to Clemson. You may not be like number one overall seed, but you impressed people and you made it in a tournament, which also made me feel good about myself. So those are my two big ones.
Yeah, Clemson really started the year out really, really well. They were undefeated for a while. And I saw this in the Cap or No Cap episode. You all mentioned Jake Highbreeder. Jake Highbreeder, he went to my high school, Floyd Central High School. Um, he went to Air Force, and now he's at Clemson. Well, my sister is best friends with his girlfriend, so I've hung out with him a couple times. It's crazy small world how he's now at Clemson. He's on the big stage. But less on to you. How or what picks of yours look the best?
Oh, this was the question that I absolutely could not wait to answer on the show today. And I said from the very beginning that the Kansas Jayhawks are overrated. And before I break their team down. I'm gonna tell you, they had a season of worsts in the Bill Self era. They had the worst record under Bill Self. They had the worst Big 12 standings under Bill Self. BYU finished higher in the Big 12 standings than Kansas. That's not something you expect to hear. And to get down to it, they're not deep. They're not a good shooting team. And to top it off, right before the conference tournament happened, their two best players went down. And a big reason why they got absolutely boat raced by Cincinnati. But yeah, Kansas from the very start of the season, I said, is I guess, better coached version of last year's Purdue team, as in a team that was rated very high, but got bounced in the first round of the NCAA tournament because a certain amount of things got exposed. Kansas, and like I said, Kansas had a season of worse this year. And now we're asking the questions, what is the health of Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough Jr.? Hopefully they're able to go because they're not a deep team with them. If they can't go, they're out in the first round. Period. Point blank. Period. And that's all I have to say about the Jayhawks. And everyone wants to talk about how the refs are at Cameron Indoor Stadium. Allen Fieldhouse makes them look like the most unbiased stadium to play at in the world, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yes, I agree on Kansas. They're losing Hunter Dickinson and McCullers Jr. for the Big 12 tournament. That was huge for them. And they don't I saw I saw this again in the cap or no cap episode. You are completely right about how they are like last year's Purdue with a big man and everyone else's role players. They don't have a Jalen Wilson. They don't have an Ochai Abachi who, I mean, he was on the taller side, but he was still a really, really good player. And yeah, it's a struggle. They've been really bad lately. We'll see what they do in the tournament. But on to the next question so we can move on. Both of you were high on the mid majors teams to destroy teams' hopes in the tournament. How are you feeling about those picks? Starting with Matt.
I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, you look who's already got a bid. We've got James Madison. They've knocked off Michigan State already. Only had a few losses going into conference play. New Mexico, Nevada, Utah State. Like I said, the entirety of the Mountain West teams again and will make noise. I absolutely am telling people now to watch out for McNeese State. I picked Will Wade as my coach, even though I realized this later. I sent less Josh Pastner, who's not even coaching for some reason. I meant Will Wade. I'm telling people now to watch out for Will Wade and McNeese State. It's going to be like last year with Iona, where Rick Pitino like left immediately after. But I think McNeese, with the right draw, is definitely going to be able to go on a run. Like I said, James Madison, the Mountain West squads, College of Charleston, another mid-major who's been kind of dynastic lately, got off to a slow start. They're playing their best basketball right now. They're going to be a tough out for somebody. Drake, we forget Drake almost ended Miami's run last season. They've returned most of that team and found out a way to get around Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Indiana State in the Missouri Valley Conference Final. They're going to be a very tough out. If Indiana State gets in, even to the first four, we know what they're capable of with their shooting and their passing. They're going to be a tough out for anybody. So I'm feeling very confident that this is going to be the year. A year a lot like the year Loyola Chicago and VCU and back when they were an unknown made it in. I think we're going to get a solid run from somebody that could result in an Elite Eight or a Final Four. And because I've said that, now they're all going to get bounced in the first round or have to play each other. So that's how it goes. But I'm feeling very confident in a lot of mid majors right now. I mean, the parity's up, and there are a lot of good teams who have been together for a while who are winning together, going and peaking at the right time. And there are a lot of high major teams who are kind of plateauing at the wrong time. And I think that's a recipe for a very upset filled first weekend of the NCAA tournament.
Yes, I have seen a bunch of clips of Mc. I'm pretty high on them. They look really, really good under Will Wade. On to you, Les. Um, did you have any mid-major teams? Like, what are your thoughts on the mid-major teams that you picked about destroying big team hopes into the tournament?
I want to start by saying, Matt, I don't know what you said, but it absolutely set Bean into a frenzy over here, and I don't appreciate it because that's what I had to do during your entire segment was get him straightened out. But anyways, you all know I'm the big school recruiting guy, but as you all also know, it's not a Less is More sports podcast without shouting out the Boise State Broncos. And I'm going to be completely honest. Boise State is giving me hella 2015 Georgia State vibes. They have the father son player coach dynamic with Leon Rice and Max Rice. Max, in my opinion, is the toughest shot maker in the country. They have other quality pieces like Omar Stanley and Tyson Dagenhart. Plus, the Mountain West tournament has been must see TV, and Boise State could be a real problem in the NCAA tournament. So do not sleep on the Broncos. Like I said, even though I'm the big school recruiting guy, it's not a Less is More sports podcast without shouting out the Boise State Broncos.
Yep, we do know you love Boise State, both football and basketball. Love to support teams that are mid majors and the big schools. Um, on to the next one. You both thought, or you both said that the Big East was going to be the toughest conference. You know, the Big 12 does have the uh, uh, most conference teams. How do you think the Big East will play out into the tournament? You know, UConn's number one team, probably overall number one seed. How do you all think that the Big East will play out into the tournament? Let's start with you, Matt, again.
I think that the Big East will probably get a team into the Final Four. Now, this is kind of what, like the give and take of the conference schedule is like. The Big East is absolutely loaded, but you've just played that gauntlet, and now you're playing teams you're not familiar with. You're playing teams with a different style. You're being officiated a different way. But the bottom line is that UConn is good. UConn could easily make it back to the Final Four, I think. Then you've got the teams like Marquette. The Tyler Kolek injury is highly concerning, but they're also very good and very veteran and have a next man up mentality. And then you think about Shaka Smart, and you kind of like, okay, we'll have to see how that goes. Then you keep moving on. You've got Providence. You've got teams like Providence. You've got Creighton with Ryan Kalkbrenner and Baylor Shireman. There are a lot of very good teams in the Big East. And like I said, the problem is they've all played each other, kind of ruined each other's schedule. It kind of ruined each other's Ken Palms and all that stuff. But I mean, when you think about the last Big East team right now in the field is most likely St. John's. And I don't think anybody wants to play St. John's right now. I know they lost to UConn yesterday, but they only lost by 10. And it was a
It's
very intense.
UConn.
Yeah, it's UConn number one, and it's a very intense and close game. I mean, I don't want my squad going up against a tournament charged Rick Pitino. I don't want him playing Jordan Dingle or Dennis Jenkins or anybody on that St. John squad. So I would be highly surprised if we don't get at least if we don't get one. It's really unusual if you get two. But I would not be surprised at all to see at least one Big East team in the Final Four. Like I said, I've got some fears about whether or not they'll be fatigued from beating up on each other, but I can't deny that that's the most fun league in basketball to watch.
I will definitely be cheering for St. John since Louisville's not in it. I will be supporting this guy right here, Rick Pitino, and Richard Pitino may be in the tournament with New Mexico.
They need to make
It's
that
New
the first
Mexico,
game.
right?
Yeah, New Mexico. They need to make that the first four games, St. John's and New Mexico, so we could have Rick versus Richard.
That would be great. That would be
Yeah,
amazing.
that would feed households.
Yes, it would. On to Les. What do you think about the Big East having a fair share in the tournament? How do you think that they will play out?
Matt, you said one team will make the Final Four from the Big East.
At least one.
I think that's generous because, well, actually, no, I worded that wrong. Sorry. I think they're going to at least get two teams in the Final Four if we're being completely honest. And you worry about fatigue, but the Big East Conference play is one of the most competitive leagues every year. And yet, every time they get to the tournament, even the teams with 10 losses or whatever go on win a couple games in the tournament every year. And we'll start with the teams that we've watched all season long. UConn has looked like the best team from start to finish to me, and what's crazy is that they're the reigning national champs, and they look even better in my opinion than they did last year. Marquette, when they're fully healthy, they're dangerous, and of course, I'm really high on Creighton. I see three future pros on the roster, They have two bucket getters in Shireman and Alexander. They have the Big East Defensive Player of the Year and Ryan Kalkbrenner, but the X factor is Stephen Ashworth. I mean, it's how he controls the tempo and how he controls the pace of the game. I read in the preseason that he was a better fit for the offense than Ryan Hemmart, according to a Creighton beat writer, and they made the Elite Eight last year. So I think if he is proven to be a better fit for the Creighton offense than Ryan Nembhard, they at least get to the Final Four. So if I had to say right now what two Big East teams I would sell the house on are going to make the Final Four, it's going to be UConn and Creighton.
Yes, the Big East is tough. Marquette's good. Creighton's good. They had a deep run last year. UConn, I agree with. It's even better. Still a player from the Big Ten. They is just they're overall number one seed. They're gonna make a deep run. That's just what they do. But back to you, Les. You picked Duke to win it all. How do you feel about their chances? You're a huge Duke fan, and they look good. You know, um, how do you think that their chances will be into the tournament?
Well, I'm going to start by saying I'm not as confident as I was in the preseason. I'll get that right out right now because they have not looked good in the last 7 days. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But even though I'm not as sold as I was in the preseason, they can still be a tough out and can get hot and make a deep tournament run. They're one of the best shooting teams in the country, on top of the fact that they're 25th in total defense. The keys of this team are not beating themselves, which has plagued them all year, and what versions of Kyle Filipowski and Tyrese Proctor are we going to get? When Tyrese Proctor and Kyle Filipowski are playing at their top of their game, there's not a team in the country that can beat them. The problem is we haven't gotten that version of them consistently. And as much as we question, whether this team is soft, whether this team has that dog in them, it's now or never, or whether we find out what this team is made of. So even though I'm not as confident as I was heading into the season, because the last time Duke returned 4 starters. They won the national title. That was a big part of the reason why I picked them in the preseason. They still have a lot of things to like going into the tournament. And like I said, if they get hot from 3, good night. You're not beating this team.
Yes, you all have a very deep team. One player that I'm really really high on from your team. Obviously, I'm high on Kyle Filipowski. I think he's a really good player. But Tyrese Proctor, I am very high on him. Every time Louisville plays Duke, he always lights us up, whether it's from three or driving in. Jeremy Roach is the veteran. He's been there for a couple of years. He's been through the the seasons of Duke making deep runs. Um, but speaking of Duke, to the conference, are we sleeping ACC? Past couple of years, it seems like some ACC teams that are slept on are making deep runs. Like last year, Miami to the Final Four. Starting with you, Matt, are we sleeping on the ACC conference going into the tournament?
Uh, it really depends on how many teams get in, how much we're sleeping. I mean, North Carolina, they're contending. They're probably going to get that fourth number one seed after Tennessee just got shellacked yesterday. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went on. I mean, you got Duke, and then kind of you got Clemson, and then you get kind of the questionable: are they going to make it? Are they not? Teams, like Virginia and Pittsburgh. And I will say this though: NC State plays North Carolina tonight, and if they get in, I wouldn't be surprised if NC State won a game. I mean, DJ Burns is playing out of his gourd right now. He's been really impressive down low. I know they've won a bunch of games in a row, but there's something to be said about the momentum as a 10 seed in the ACC going all the way to the final. And if they win it, they probably have to win it to get in. They will be really impressed. I think they'll win a game. I really do. I think that if NC State wins the tournament tonight, they'll win a game. Pittsburgh is the team for me that is the most boomer bust because they may not get in, but if they get in, I wouldn't be surprised if they went on a little bit of a mini run too. They may not be a second weekend team, but I wouldn't be surprised at all with their length and their defense if they pulled like an upset in the first round. I don't know how exactly they'd be seeded. My guess is they'd probably be a play-in team or an 11th seed. But I like the length. I like Federico. I like the length he's got. Henson's been playing really good lately. The the weirdest team for me out of all this is Pittsburgh because if they get in, which is the big question mark, if they get in, they can go on a run. I think that Wake Forest is probably out, especially since they lost to Pittsburgh. I think that they're probably out right now. I don't know. That's the thing about bracketology. No one knows. So if Pitt gets in, I think they can go on a little bit of a run. Virginia, I've just kind of quit trusting Virginia in the tournament outside of like years where they look really good, and they look okay this year. We all know what happened to them last year. So if I had to pick one ACC team that we are sleeping on, if they get in, I would go with Pittsburgh.
Yes, and uh, back to a few things that you said. You mentioned DJ Burns, and I really like DJ Burns. They were saying on 93.9 that if he was little slimmer and if he could go past 10 minutes a game, he could be really, really good and he could be a unit. He reminds me a little bit of Danger from Illinois. They're the same type of big men. They're absolute units. And if you have a tall, slim guy like Ohio State had yesterday, then he's gonna cause you to foul. He's gonna move you around in the paint, and it's sometimes unfair, but that's just how it is. On to you, Les. Are we sleeping on the ACC going into the tournament?
Well, I feel like the committee does it every year. I mean, every year they're one of the fewer Power Five schools that get teams into the NCAA tournament. But every time we reach the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight, they're among the top of the list of the Power Five conference with the most teams left. So we do it every year. And like we said, as much as I hate to admit it, North Carolina looks like a national championship team. Duke can either win in the can either lose in the first round or win it all, depending on how they shoot. But I also want to point out because you talked about Wake Forest. They lost their Super Bowl against Duke, and then they absolutely fell to shit. So I wouldn't be the Duke fan if I didn't uh, throw that in there. But yeah, no, we sleep on the ACC every year, but and the committee just doesn't learn. I mean, would you say the definition of insanity is? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That's exactly what the committee does with the ACC every year, and it's getting annoying at this point.
Yep, I agree that ACC teams are underappreciated going into the tournament. We just hit the 10-minute mark. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna ask this question. The On to the SEC. Oh, yesterday, the Tennessee Volunteers and Kentucky Wildcats lost, which were huge, huge surprises because we thought that Tennessee or Kentucky had the chance to win the whole SEC tournament. Obviously they lost. Texas A&M looks good. They beat Kentucky earlier in the year. Now they beat them again. It's hard to beat a team twice, but the SEC typically doesn't do that well in the tournament in recent years. But Kentucky looks better in recent years, and Tennessee, who Matt predicted to finish second, won won the regular season conference. What what was what are your on the SEC and Tennessee and Kentucky maybe making a deep run? I'll start with Matt.
UK scares the absolute hell out of me because they have one of the most dynamic offenses I've ever seen, but their defense is just so
Bad.
abysmal at times. Yes, that if they get into a first or second round matchup with another team that likes to spread the floor, get out there and jack up threes, they could be in some real trouble. I mean, Kentucky, if they end up with like a McNeese State or a College of Charleston, I would have my eye on that game like there was about like something could happen because that's how I feel about that thing. That's how I feel. I've heard them described as a national championship offense with a round of 32 defense. And unless you're just outscoring the other team like you're going berserk from beyond the arc, that's not a recipe to win. Tennessee, they'll be okay. They're going to end up with a 2 seed. They're going to be like the top 2 seed. They're going to be fine going forward. I think a few off gains from Dalton Neck from carrying the weight of the world on his shoulder, carrying the Sun Dome of Knoxville on his back. He's going to be fine. They're going to be fine. Tennessee plays good enough defense to move on. But what really interests me is that second tier of SEC teams where you've got your Alabamas, your Auburns, your Texas A&Ms, and your I can't think of the other team I was going to say. Where you've got teams who are pretty explosive. We know Alabama's explosive on offense. Auburn plays a very balanced game. and Texas A&M is getting hot at the right time with senior leadership. Those three teams really fascinate me going forward, and even now, Mississippi State, a team that was on the bubble, is cementing their place in the field with Tolu Smith playing out of his mind right now. I would be not shocked if the SEC ended up with the most teams in the Sweet 16 by conference. I would not be shocked at all if that happened because it's a very deep league and a lot of teams are getting hot right at the right time. And the teams that are good in the SEC are some of the top tier teams in the country. And I'm going to tell you now, if I had to pick one SEC team to go the furthest, and I think Les might agree with me on this, I'm picking Auburn. That's my take.
Um, I agree with the scare pick of Kentucky. I think that if they meet a team in the tournament that is more physical and rough around the rim, I think that they could find some trouble because I don't think that their body needs to be what it is right now. But on to you, Les. How do you think that teams like Tennessee and Kentucky in the SEC and the whole SEC will do in the tournament?
Well, I want to start by addressing Matt's point where he said that he thinks the SEC could have the most teams in the Sweet 16. I think that statement's absolutely wild because we see it every year. SEC always has one of the most teams in, and they have one of the least amount of teams when we reach the SEC or the Elite Eight. And I think you touched on Kentucky and Tennessee pretty well. Kentucky's 195th in KenPom total defense. They can score with the best of them, but they can get outscored by the best of them. Tennessee, if you can handle their pressure defense and you can beat them two ways offensively. If Dalton Connect has a bad game, or in some cases, like against Kentucky, um, you just let him score whatever he wants and you shut everybody else down. They're going to get eliminated early. Alabama lives and dies by the 3-point shot. I mean, I think they shot 52 threes in one game this season, which for a college game, that's absolutely insane. So, I mean, yeah, they can get hot, but they can also go ice cold as well. The two teams I like, yes, like you said, Auburn. I think they're very balanced. And I think they have a lot of things. They can do a lot of things well and can beat you in a lot of ways. But the problem with them is they don't have a lot of wins that are under 10 points. So I mean, they either blow you out or they get beat. So that's my issue with them. But yes, I do think they can go the farthest. And then another sleeper one that I like is Florida. They have some of the best guard play in the SEC, and they crash the offensive glass. And that combination, I think, could be a sleeper pick to make a deep NCAA tournament run if they get in. That is.
And the weirdest thing about all this is that we're talking about it right now, but this literally all comes down to what people are deciding in Indianapolis right now.
Yeah.
We could say all these things, but until we see the brackets at 6 o'clock tomorrow, we won't actually know. Like, oh, that sounds awful. I made a horrible pick there.
Mm-hmm. I'll say we got about 3 minutes
Yes.
left though, so we got some more questions.
Yes, I can't wait to watch the selection show tomorrow. And Les, what you said about Florida, I really like Walter Clayton Jr. on that team. I think he's an absolute bucket. I think he's a really, really good player, and they've been surprisingly good. I did not see them from the preseason doing well now. But back to you, Les. Look, you picked Arizona to win the Pac-12, and they not only did that, they are likely getting probably a 1 seed, maybe 2 seed. I think it's more closer to 2 seed. Um, is this the year that Tommy Lloyd, coach for Arizona, breaks past the first weekend? And last year they lost to Princeton. It was disappointing. Do you think that they will break past the first weekend?
I was ready to come on this podcast and say absolutely because I like the makeup of this team. I like Omar Balu. I like Larson. Caleb Love and Kylan Boswell at times have looked like some of the best backcourts in the country until last night when they blew a double-digit lead to lose to Oregon in the Pac-12 tournament. That was very concerning. And I think the more tape I've gone back to watch, this team has a problem with getting lulled to sleep. So I think if they get a big lead on a team and get very too comfortable, they can creep right back up on them, and just like that, they can lose a game. So I was ready to say that yes, this could be the year, but they have a serious being lulled to sleep problem that I'm worried about. And we got about a minute left, dude. We flew through this episode.
Last question for Matt. What are your thoughts on Arizona maybe making it past the second or the first weekend?
I agree with Les. I mean, I watched a little bit of that Oregon game this morning, and it's very concerning. They do have a tendency to get lulled to sleep, and we know that teams who can play big and physical can have a way to get in their head. I mean, we saw it before at Atlantic. We saw it when they played Purdue. We know that these, and they're probably going to, if they do make it past the first weekend, those are the kind of teams they're going to play. So I'm with Les here. I Arizona is definitely a boomer bust team. They will either make it to the Elite Eight or they will lose in the round 32. And it just comes down to who they get and how lulled to sleep they are.
That
Yes,
concludes the
I
latest episode of the Less is More Sports podcast. As always, like and subscribe to Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channel. Be sure to like our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Threads. That's at Less is More Sports. And be sure to comment on this video how Ryan did leading the show. But until next time, can't wait for some March Madness basketball. And Matt, Ryan, and I are officially out.